I'm 28 now, but this happened a little over a year ago, when I was still settling into my new life in Arlington, Texas. I'm a school teacher, middle school English, and I had just moved into a small single-story house in a quiet neighborhood near the edge of town. It wasn't fancy or anything, just a two-bedroom place with creaky floorboards and a temperamental porch light. But it was mine. That night I'd stayed late at school helping chaperone a student theater showcase, and by the time I got home, it was a little past 10:30 p.m. I remember because my feet were killing me from standing in cheap heels all evening, and all I could think about was taking a hot shower and passing out. The house next door was an Airbnb, one of those short-term rentals that rotates different guests every week. I never really got to know who stayed there, and honestly, I kind of preferred it that way. That night, when I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something weird. The front door of the Airbnb was open, not wide, but just barely ajar. At first I thought maybe the wind had caught it, but the night was completely still. Then I figured the guests had just been careless. It wasn't the first time. A couple months prior, someone had left the back gate wide open and my dog, Cleo, bolted into the street. So yeah, I was annoyed, but not surprised. I didn't get out to check, just muttered something under my breath and walked into my house. Everything was normal for the first couple of hours. I showered, fed Cleo, and sat on the couch eating leftover pad thai while watching a trashy reality show I wasn't even paying attention to. Around midnight, I turned everything off and locked up. I double-checked the front door, just like I always do. I even remember pausing to pull the bolt all the way into place, something I sometimes forget. Then I went to bed, leaving Cleo curled up on the couch like usual. I didn't hear anything, not a sound, and that silence made what happened next even more jarring. Because out of nowhere, my front door exploded inward with this deafening crack, like someone had fired a shotgun point blank at the frame. I didn't even have time to sit up before two men stormed in. Both wore dark hoodies and full ski masks. One was tall and thin with a limp in his left leg, and the other was stocky, almost wide in the shoulders like a linebacker. The tall one had a knife in his hand, the kind with a curved blade that catches the light. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just lay there under my covers, heart jackhammering. Then the stocky guy barked, "Where's the cash?" and yanked the blanket off me like I was a piece of furniture. I told them I didn't have anything, that they had the wrong house, that I was a teacher, but the guy with the knife just got closer. He pressed the blade to my cheek so lightly it didn't cut, but I could feel the cold metal. "Don't lie," he said. "We know what this is." I kept telling them over and over that they were in the wrong place, that the Airbnb was next door, but they didn't believe me. The stocky one kept pacing through my bedroom, opening drawers, knocking over my laundry hamper like he was sure something was hidden. The one with the limp stayed close to me, never letting the knife leave my skin for more than a second. My mind was racing so fast I could barely process what was happening. But one thing stuck with me. They weren't just looking for money. They were looking for something specific. The way they kept asking, "Where did you hide it? You moved it, didn't you?" Like they thought I was playing dumb. That's when I started to realize they weren't here for a random robbery. They thought I was part of something. After a few minutes, they dragged me out of my room and into the living room. Cleo started barking like mad from the couch, and the stocky guy kicked at her, not hard, just enough to send her scurrying under the table. He yelled at me to shut her up, and when I tried to call her, she wouldn't come out. That broke me a little. I think that's when I started crying. Not loud, just these silent sobs I couldn't hold back. They tore through the living room next, flinging open kitchen cabinets, tipping over the garbage can. One of them even pulled the vent cover off near the floor like they were checking for a hidden stash. It was surreal. I wanted to scream at them, tell them I had no idea what they were talking about, but something in me knew that saying too much might make it worse. Then, suddenly, we all froze. There was a sound, footsteps, voices, coming from next door. The real guests had returned. I recognized one of the voices, a woman, maybe in her 30s, laughing about how the Uber driver missed the street twice. I'll never forget the way the intruders looked at each other when they heard that. Just one quick glance between them, but everything shifted. The guy with the limp whispered, "This isn't the right house," and for a split second, I felt hope. I thought maybe they'd realize the mistake and just leave, but instead, their energy changed. The stocky one grabbed me by the wrist and hissed, "You set us up, didn't you?" His grip was like iron. "You little bitch." At that point, I genuinely thought I was going to die. The guy with the knife pushed me down onto my knees and started yelling, loud now, about how I'd called the cops, how the neighbors were probably part of it, how they were being ambushed. He started pacing in circles, muttering to himself like he was unraveling right in front of me. I tried to say it was all a coincidence, that I lived here, that I had nothing to do with anything, but they weren't listening. I don't think they could. They were too deep in whatever paranoid spiral they'd already built in their heads. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even keep them up when the stocky guy shouted, "Where's your phone? Where is it?" My phone was still on the nightstand in my bedroom, but I lied and told them it was dead, hoping they wouldn't try to go back and look for it. At that point, I was running on pure instinct. I could barely feel my own body. Every sound outside, every laugh, car door, dog bark, felt like it was amplified 100 times. Then we all heard it. A loud knock next door, followed by someone shouting, "Hey, why is the door open?" That was the Airbnb guests. The panic that washed over the two men was instant. The tall one bolted to the front window, peeked out, then cursed loudly. "There's more of them," he said. "This is bad." I'll never forget the way his voice cracked when he said it. Like it had just hit him how screwed they really were. The next few seconds felt like they stretched forever. The stocky guy turned back to me, stared at me for a moment, then grabbed a dish towel from the kitchen counter and tied my hands together. Not tight, more like a panic move. Then they both ran toward the back door and disappeared into the night, leaving it swinging wide open. I sat there frozen, tied up, still kneeling on my living room floor, trying to process the fact that I was alive. Cleo crawled out from under the table and started whining, licking my face. I couldn't stop shaking. My arms, my legs, even my jaw. I couldn't control any of it. I don't even remember getting up. I think my body just moved on autopilot, straight to the front door, where I stood until the Airbnb guests noticed me and came running over. They were the ones who called the police. I barely said a word when the officers arrived. Just sat on my couch with Cleo in my lap, nodding when they asked questions. They dusted for prints, took a statement, said they'd canvass the neighborhood, but I could tell by the tone in their voices they didn't expect to catch them. Apparently, the men never even touched the Airbnb. They must have scoped out the place earlier in the day, mixed up the address, and assumed my house was empty. Nothing of major value was stolen, just a few things here and there. Some jewelry, my work laptop, a box of cash I kept hidden in the pantry for emergencies. But the worst part wasn't what they took. It was how they made me feel, like my home had been cracked open from the inside. After that night, I couldn't sleep right for months. Every creak in the house sent me into a panic. I got security cameras, reinforced my doors, even adopted a second dog. The police never found the guys, and I probably wouldn't recognize them if I saw them today. But sometimes I still wonder what they were looking for, what they thought they'd find in that Airbnb. Drugs? Money? Something darker? I'll probably never know. All I know is I was in the wrong house at the wrong time, and they thought I was part of something I didn't even understand. I tell myself I was lucky, and I guess I was. But even now, if a door creaks open just a little too slowly, my body still remembers. My heart still races. and I still lock my doors 3 times before bed. I was 24 at the time and had just moved into a small basement apartment on the edge of town in Bellingham, Washington. It was early November, that time of year when the air feels like it's biting at your skin even before the sun fully sets. I'd moved there a couple months earlier, after finally saving enough to live on my own. I was working remotely for a logistics company, freelancing part-time on the side, and honestly just trying to build some peace into my life. The apartment was part of a single-unit house, but the basement had a separate entrance around the back. It was small, but cozy in a way I'd grown to love. Low ceilings, creaky floors, and a weird charm that made it feel like mine. That night I was curled up on my couch with a hoodie on, eating leftover pasta and watching some dumb reality show I wasn't even paying attention to. It was about 9:45 p.m. when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks on my front door. I froze. Nobody ever came to my place unannounced, especially not that late. My first instinct was that it was a neighbor or maybe someone lost. I muted the TV and walked slowly toward the door. There's a small frosted window at the top, and when I peeked through I saw a guy standing there, mid-30s maybe, wearing a dark jacket and holding one of those insulated food delivery bags. He smiled like he was trying too hard and said through the door, "Hey, sorry, it's probably for the unit upstairs. Got an order for a Thomas?" That caught me off guard. "There's no upstairs," I replied. "It's a single unit. No one else lives here." He hesitated for just a second, too short for most people to catch, but I noticed it. Then he nodded slowly, like he didn't quite believe me, and said, "Ah, weird. Sorry about that," before walking off toward the driveway. I stood there a moment longer than I probably needed to. Something felt off. But I told myself I was just being jumpy. I triple-locked the door anyway. An hour passed, and I had already tried to shake it off. I even posted in a local Facebook group about it, half joking about weird delivery mix-ups. Around 10:45, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I heard it. The sliding sound of the small window just above my toilet moving open. My body locked up instantly. It was one of those cheap horizontal sliders, and I'd left it cracked earlier because of the steam from my shower. My first thought was, raccoon. Then, nope, that's too deliberate. I didn't even rinse my mouth. I backed out of the bathroom without making a sound and turned off every light as I moved, my heart beating so fast I felt it in my fingertips. I slipped into my bedroom and shut the door as quietly as I could, pressing the lock into place with trembling fingers. I didn't even breathe until I was sure the click hadn't echoed. My phone was still on the bed, thank God. I grabbed it and texted my best friend first, just instinctively, then immediately dialed 911. I remember whispering to the dispatcher, trying to keep my voice level while my body was shaking so hard the screen kept slipping against my cheek. I told her someone was in my apartment, that I was sure I'd heard the window open, and now there were faint footsteps in the living room. She kept asking me questions, but I couldn't focus. All I could think was, he didn't come here for food. He came for me. The weirdest part? I never heard the front door open. No crash, no sound of it being forced, which meant he'd been outside long enough to find the one window I stupidly left cracked. That little square above the toilet was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but I guess for someone determined enough, it didn't matter. I sat on the floor, knees pulled up to my chest, phone still pressed to my ear, and I remember trying to slow my breathing, because it felt like even that might give me away. The dispatcher was calm, too calm, and kept repeating, "Officers are on the way. Stay where you are. Don't hang up." Minutes dragged like hours. I could hear movement. Not loud, not fast. Just slow, careful steps. At one point, something shifted near the hallway. I think it was my coat rack tipping slightly. I had this awful mental image of him standing there just listening. Not grabbing anything, not searching through drawers, just listening. That silence between each sound is what really stuck with me. It was deliberate. I've replayed those moments 1,000 times since. Whoever he wasn't clumsy or panicked. He moved like someone who had done this before. Then came the part that makes my stomach turn every time I think about it. I heard my own bedroom doorknob softly jiggle, like someone was testing it, just once. Not a full twist, just enough to know it was locked. I covered my mouth with both hands. The dispatcher must have heard the sudden intake of breath I made, because she whispered, "Stay with me, don't say anything." I didn't. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stared at the door in the dark and waited. I didn't hear the sirens at first, just a thump, some kind of movement near the bathroom, then nothing. Silence again. It was the kind of silence that presses against your ears, like they're waiting to hear something. When the red and blue lights finally started flashing faintly through my small bedroom window, I think I let out the first real breath I'd taken in 10 minutes. The dispatcher said, "They're outside," and I whispered back, "Please don't let them leave." I stayed frozen until I heard the loud knock, this time from the cops. 3 bangs and a voice calling, "Bellingham PD, ma'am, it's safe to come out now." Even with them there, I hesitated. I made them show their badges through the window before I unlatched the door. When I finally stepped out, there were 3 officers inside already. 2 men and a woman, flashlights scanning every inch of my place. One of them was holding the bathroom window open with a gloved hand, examining the frame. "He came in through here," I said, pointing. The officer nodded, expression unreadable. Another cop asked if anything was missing. I looked around. My wallet was on the counter, my laptop still on the couch. Nothing had been touched, nothing taken. That's when I said it out loud for the first time. He wasn't here to rob me. They didn't find him. Whoever he was, he slipped out before the cops pulled in, either back through the bathroom or out the front without making a sound. But what they did find was what really shook me. The officer asked if I recognized the name Thomas, the one the guy at the door had mentioned earlier. I said no. Then he showed me a printout from dispatch. There had been a break-in just a few blocks over the week before, same MO. Guy pretended to be a delivery driver. Name Thomas was used then too. That time, the woman hadn't locked her door. She'd been assaulted. I didn't sleep for weeks after that. I moved out by the end of the month. Couldn't stay in that basement knowing he might have been watching me longer than just that night. I replaced my phone, updated my social media privacy settings, even started carrying pepper spray. Not that I think it would have helped. What messes with me most is how calm he was. Like he didn't care about the stuff in my apartment. Like he had a script. I still don't know what he wanted exactly. But I know he picked me. And I know it wasn't random. So, yeah. If someone ever shows up to your door at night with a food order you didn't place, don't open it. Trust your gut. Because the guy who came to mine wasn't looking for money. He wasn't even looking for a victim of opportunity. He came prepared, quiet, patient, like it wasn't his first time. And maybe, just maybe, he had no intention of letting it be his last. I'm not really the type to post stuff online like this, but after what happened last year, I've been carrying around this weird mix of fear, guilt, and disbelief. I figured maybe someone out there has gone through something similar, or maybe someone needs a reminder to trust their gut. My name's Ben. I'm 47, divorced, and I live alone in a small single-level house in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's nothing fancy, just your typical 3-bedroom spot with creaky floors and a lawn that gets out of hand if I blink too long. That week, I'd just gotten back from visiting my daughter in Stillwater. I remember the weather being unusually warm for October, and the whole place had that stale smell from being shut up too long. The day everything started, I was dealing with this minor but annoying leak coming from my water heater in the laundry room. Nothing dramatic, just a slow drip pooling near the baseboard. I'm decent with tools, but plumbing stuff? Not my thing. So I did what a lot of people do when they want something done fast and cheap. I checked Craigslist, found a post that said local handyman, cheap, fast, reliable. The guy's name was Kyle, according to the post. He texted back quick, said he was in the area and could swing by within the hour. I figured I got lucky. He showed up in this beat-up white Ford Ranger with one of those magnetic signs on the door, just saying, Kyle's Home Services. Mid-30s, shaggy brown hair under a backward cap, wire-rimmed glasses that didn't quite fit his face. He had that casual, overly friendly vibe, like he was trying a little too hard to come off as normal. Called me boss a lot. Anyway, he walked in, looked at the heater, crouched down, poked around for maybe 3 minutes, and then stood up and said, "Yeah, I'll need to come back tomorrow with some parts. Shouldn't take long." I didn't think much of it. He even made a dumb joke on his way out about not tripping over my garden hose next time. I laughed. That night I stayed up later than usual, watching some old Western reruns and scrolling through Facebook. Around 1:30 a.m., I was half asleep on the couch when I heard this soft, deliberate creaking sound, coming from the hallway that connects the bedrooms to the kitchen. At first I thought it was the house settling, or maybe I left a window cracked. But something about the rhythm of the creaks, it wasn't random. It was spaced, like footsteps. Slow, careful. I sat there frozen for maybe 10 seconds, then stood up quietly and listened. That's when I saw the faintest sliver of light coming from the kitchen. And I swear to God, I already knew. I just knew something was wrong. I walked down the hallway without turning on any lights. My feet were bare, and I could feel how cold the floor had gotten, like the kind of cold that doesn't make sense for Oklahoma in October. As I got closer to the kitchen, I could hear something, this faint rustling, like plastic or fabric. I rounded the corner slowly, heart pounding in my ears, and there he was, standing in the middle of my kitchen like he fucking lived there. Kyle, same backward cap, same glasses, but this time no tool bag. Just a pair of gloves, a crowbar in one hand, and a roll of duct tape on the counter next to a bundle of zip ties. That image is burned into my memory. I can still see how calm he looked, like he was just deciding which drawer had the good knives. I don't even remember deciding to move, but something primal kicked in. I shouted, loud. Just this full force, "Hey!" that cracked my throat. He jumped, wide-eyed, dropped the crowbar, and ran like hell toward the back door. I chased him, but by the time I hit the porch, he'd already vaulted the fence and vanished into the dark. My legs were shaking so bad I nearly fell into the grass. I stood there for what felt like minutes, barefoot, shivering, just staring at the spot where he disappeared, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I kept thinking, why no tools? Why the duct tape? Why the zip ties? He didn't come to steal anything. That much was clear. When I finally came back inside and locked everything, I noticed the window over the sink was unlocked, just slightly slid open. He must have done that earlier when he checked the water heater. I remember replaying the moment he went to the kitchen to get water before leaving. He'd even asked if I had a glass. I didn't think anything of it then, but now I know he was just stalling, looking for a way in later. The police came, took my statement, dusted for prints, the whole thing. But Kyle, or whatever his real name was, left nothing behind. Burner phone, fake business name. The Ranger? Stolen. There was no record of the license plate I gave them. The guy was a ghost. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep right. Every creak in the house made my skin crawl. I installed cameras, changed the locks, even got a new security system installed with motion sensors in every room. The cops told me I was probably just one of many. Said they'd seen Craigslist workers like this before, guys who scout houses and come back later for God knows what. But none of that made me feel better. Because what I can't shake is the feeling that he wasn't trying to rob me. He didn't have a bag, didn't check drawers. He came in with zip ties and duct tape. And that only means one thing. I think what really messed me up was how close I came to not waking up that night. I usually sleep like a rock, especially after a long day. If I hadn't dozed off on the couch with the TV still going, maybe he would have made it into my bedroom. And if he had, well, I've played that scenario 1,000 times in my head. The zip ties, the duct tape, the crowbar. That wasn't a robbery kit. That was a control kit. Like he had planned something sick. And what's worse is I let him in. I opened the door. I even offered him coffee. That part keeps me up the most. I still check Craigslist sometimes. Not to hire anyone, but to see if his ad ever pops back up under a different name. I've gotten paranoid, I won't lie. I vet everyone now. Plumbers, electricians, dog groomers, doesn't matter. If they don't have a business license, a website, and at least 10 good reviews, I'm not even answering the door. I've become that guy. My daughter says I've changed, and she's not wrong. I used to be easygoing, trusting. Not anymore. Not after seeing someone standing in your kitchen in the middle of the night, uninvited and too calm. The only thing that brought me some peace was something the officer said that night. He told me, "Whatever he planned, you interrupted it, and that might have saved your life." It stuck with me. I think about how many people wouldn't have questioned a leaky water heater. How many folks just let guys like that in without thinking twice? That's why I'm posting this. Not for sympathy, not for attention, but as a warning. Be careful who you let into your home, even if they smile, even if they call you boss, even if they seem harmless. Because sometimes the scariest people aren't the ones breaking in through a smashed window. They're the ones who walked through the front door because you invited them. I've never really shared this with anyone outside my close circle, mostly because it still freaks me out to this day. This happened about 1.5 years ago, when my husband Mark and I were living in this quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio. We just moved in 3 months earlier. First house, newlyweds, trying to settle into something resembling a routine. I was working remotely as a freelance graphic designer, and Mark had a 9-to-5 with a tech company downtown. Things were good. Normal. We had neighbors who waved when we passed by, a dog who barked too much next door, and a gym 5 minutes away where I went 3 times a week. I never thought something so dark could happen in a place that felt so safe. It was a Friday night, early spring, and we'd just come back from dinner at this cozy little Italian place downtown. It was around 9:30 p.m., and it was one of those crisp nights where the air feels cleaner than usual. I remember stepping out of the car and immediately noticing that the garage door was wide open. Mark looked at me, confused, and said, "Did you forget to close it before we left?" I could have sworn I hit the button when we pulled out earlier, but I second-guessed myself. It happens, right? You think you did something and realize later you didn't. I remember even making a joke like, "Great start to being homeowners. Might as well put a sign up that says, 'Come rob us.'" We both laughed it off. We went inside, did our usual end-of-day things. I washed my face, Mark fed the cat, and we were in bed by maybe 11:15. Nothing felt off. No chills down my spine, no strange sounds, no reason to be on edge. I even remember scrolling through Instagram for a while and showing Mark a meme about couples who fall asleep with the TV on. It was just another night. I fell asleep with the comfort of routine, the kind that makes you believe everything's under control. But sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly, not from a sound exactly, but from a strange feeling, like something wasn't right. You know when your body wakes you up before your brain understands why? At first I thought maybe I was imagining it. I stayed still for a moment, ears straining. That's when I heard it, soft creaking from downstairs. It wasn't the cat. Our cat Luna was curled up at the foot of the bed, and even she lifted her head like she sensed something. I gently nudged Mark. "Babe, did you hear that?" He blinked, still half asleep, and said, "What?" I whispered. "Shh. Listen." We both went quiet. Then another creak, followed by what sounded like the floorboard near the kitchen groaning. Mark sat up instantly. We just stared at each other. That kind of silence where your heart beats in your throat, and you don't want to move, because if you move, it makes it real. Mark got out of bed first. He didn't even turn the light on, just reached quietly into his nightstand drawer, where he kept this heavy flashlight we sometimes use during power outages. I followed behind him, barefoot, my whole body tense. Every creak of the floor sounded louder than it should have. We paused at the top of the stairs, listening. The house was still again. No footsteps, no sounds. Mark whispered, "Maybe it was the water heater or something," but I could tell he didn't believe it. We started walking down the steps slowly. The kind of slow where each step felt like it took a minute. And then, about halfway down, we both froze. From the kitchen, right by the door that leads into the garage, we heard something slide, like a shoe scuffing against tile. I can't describe the kind of adrenaline that hit me. I felt like my skin was too tight for my body. Mark whispered, "Go back up, lock the door, call 911. I hesitated. I didn't want to leave him, but the sound came again, this time like something bumped into the trash can. I ran. Not gracefully. Not quietly. I ran up the stairs, shut our bedroom door, locked it, and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. When I finally got through to dispatch, I could barely get the words out. "Someone's in our house. I think they came in through the garage." She told me to stay on the line, stay locked in the room, and wait for officers to arrive. I kept whispering updates as I listened through the door. Mark had stayed downstairs, which made me feel sick, but I could hear his voice. He was yelling from the hallway, "Whoever you are, I've called the cops. Get out of my house." No response. Then I heard this dull thud, like something being dropped, followed by footsteps, fast ones, bolting through the house, and then the slam of the back door. I ran to the bedroom window and saw movement in the yard. A man, tall, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie, running toward the trees at the back of the property. The whole thing felt like it lasted hours, but it must have been under 2 minutes. By the time the police got there, he was long gone. Mark was okay, shaken but unhurt. They searched the house top to bottom. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. Just weird. That's what really messed with me. He didn't take anything. Our wallets were in the kitchen. There was a laptop on the dining table, jewelry in plain sight. But everything was still there. When the officers came back after checking the perimeter, one of them asked, "Was your garage open when you got home?" I nodded. He looked at his partner and said, "We've had a couple reports lately of a guy using a universal garage remote, probably stolen from someone nearby. He goes house to house clicking until he finds one that opens." My stomach dropped. That meant he hadn't just broken in on a whim. He'd been testing houses, looking for one that gave him access. And somehow, it was ours. The next few hours were a blur. Cops walked around shining flashlights in every corner, asking questions, taking notes. I couldn't stop shaking. Mark kept his arm around me, but I could tell he was trying to stay composed for my sake. One of the officers found muddy footprints inside the garage and leading into the kitchen, faint but clear. That's when it hit me. He had been waiting in our garage, probably the entire time we were out at dinner, just standing in the dark, maybe behind the bins or next to the water heater, listening as we pulled in, walked past him, and went to bed. The thought made my skin crawl. I kept replaying the sound I heard when I woke up, that soft creak. He must have entered while we were sleeping. The weirdest part? A few days later, our neighbor Danielle, the one who lives 2 doors down, knocked on our door looking pale. She told us her husband's universal garage remote had gone missing from his truck. Stolen, no sign of forced entry. The cops had already linked a few reports in the area, and they believed the guy had taken that remote and had been walking or driving through the neighborhood, pressing buttons, hoping to find a match. But it wasn't just random. Danielle told me something that made my stomach turn. She'd seen someone matching that man's description hanging around the gym parking lot a few times, always parked far back, not working out, just watching. That's when I realized he hadn't picked our garage by chance. I felt sick. I'd been going to that gym regularly, often leaving after dark. I'd parked in the same spot almost every time, earbuds in, not really paying attention to anything around me. It dawned on me that this man, whoever he was, had been watching me, following me. And once he figured out which house was mine, he waited for the right moment. He didn't want our stuff. He wanted access to me. That hit harder than anything else. The violation wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Knowing someone targeted me, studied me, and then entered my home, it broke something in me. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me jump. I stopped going to that gym. We got new locks, cameras, motion lights, a security system, everything. He was never caught. The police believe he may have moved on or gotten spooked after the incident. I guess it's a good thing he ran, but I never got closure. Just the lingering paranoia that maybe one day he'll come back, or do it to someone else. The worst part is how subtle it all was. One stolen remote, one open garage, one silent moment in the middle of the night that changed the way I feel in my own home. People always imagine intruders breaking windows or kicking in doors, but sometimes it's way quieter than that. Sometimes they're already inside, just waiting. I was 22 at the time, living in a quiet neighborhood just outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was a senior in college, majoring in communications, juggling part-time shifts at a local coffee shop, and splitting rent with 2 roommates. That Thursday was supposed to be a normal day. I had an early class, but I skipped it. I wasn't sick or anything, I just felt drained and decided to stay home, eat leftovers, and binge whatever garbage Netflix threw at me. Looking back, I can't stop thinking how one small choice, just skipping class, put me in the worst situation I've ever been in. It was around 1 p.m. I remember that clearly because I had just finished reheating some pasta and was sitting cross-legged on the couch in my hoodie, half watching a cooking show with the volume low. That's when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but random Amazon packages showed up all the time. My roommates were always ordering stuff. I peeked through the peephole and saw a guy standing there, kind of hunched over in a gray hoodie, holding a small brown box. He looked like any other delivery dude, except he didn't have a badge or a logo or anything. But I was so used to people leaving packages at the door that I didn't even think twice. The second I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, it was like a switch flipped. The guy with the box stepped aside, and 2 other men, both masked, both dressed in black, rushed me. One of them shoved me hard in the chest, and I stumbled back over the edge of the rug, falling onto my side near the coffee table. I barely had time to process anything before I saw a gun in one of their hands. A real one. I froze. My ears were ringing, like my brain couldn't catch up with my body. One of them yelled at me to shut up, though I hadn't even said anything, and before I could move, they were already yanking out cables from the TV and wrapping them around my wrists. They didn't just tie my hands, they pulled the cords tight enough to burn, looped them around my ankles too, and then shoved me face down onto the living room floor. My cheek was pressed against the hardwood, and all I could smell was dust and leftover pasta sauce that had splashed onto the ground. One of them kept pacing near the door while the other tore through the apartment, flipping cushions, opening drawers, dumping out laundry baskets like they were searching for something specific. The third guy, the one I originally saw, was quieter. He stayed by the hallway, peeking into rooms, almost like he was waiting for someone else to come home. I tried to stay completely still, but my heart was pounding so loud I was scared they'd hear it. At some point, one of them crouched down beside me and asked, "Where is he?" I had no idea who they were talking about. I mumbled something like, "It's just me here," and he grabbed my shirt collar, yanked my head up a little and said, "Don't lie to me, man." His breath smelled like cigarettes and something sweet. Maybe gum? I was too scared to think straight. He let go and stood back up, yelling down the hallway to one of the others, "Check the basement." That's when it hit me. They were looking for my roommate, Dylan. Dylan wasn't the type of guy you'd expect to have enemies, at least not on the surface. He was quiet, always paid rent on time, never brought sketchy people around. But now that I think about it, he'd been getting a lot of late-night calls lately, always stepping outside to talk. A few weeks earlier, I heard him arguing with someone over the phone, saying things like, "I just need a few more days," and "I'm good for it, I swear." I didn't ask questions. I figured it was some personal drama, maybe a girl, maybe money. But now, lying face down on the floor with my limbs going numb, I was realizing that whatever Dylan was into, it was way worse than I imagined. One of the guys came stomping back up the basement stairs, cursing. "He's not here," he snapped. The others started getting more aggressive, slamming cabinet doors, knocking over bookshelves, pulling drawers out so hard they crashed to the floor. I couldn't see much from where I was, but I heard every little sound. The jingling of my keys being tossed, my laptop bag hitting the wall, the fridge being yanked open and slammed shut. At one point I heard a ripping noise, like they'd cut open the couch cushions. They were frantic, like whatever they came for had to be in that house. I didn't dare say a word. Eventually, one of them stood over me and kicked my side. Not hard, but enough to make me flinch. "Tell Dylan we'll be back," he said, in a low, even voice. Then they just left. No dramatic exit, no warning shot, nothing. I heard the front door close, and for a moment I was scared they were still inside, waiting to see if I'd move. But after a few minutes of total silence, I realized I was alone. My arms and legs were aching from the cords, and I could barely feel my fingers. I started inching toward the coffee table, trying to knock my phone off it, hoping it hadn't been taken or broken. It took me a good 10 minutes just to knock my phone off the table, and another 5 to worm myself into a position where I could hit the emergency call button with my nose. I was shaking so bad I could barely control the screen, but I managed to call 911. I remember whispering into the speaker, my voice cracking, telling them I'd been tied up and robbed. The dispatcher kept asking if I was safe and if the intruders were still there. I could barely breathe, let alone speak clearly. She stayed on the line until I heard the sirens, an oddly comforting sound, even though it felt like everything around me had already collapsed. When the cops showed up, they had to cut the cords off with a pocket knife. One of them, Officer Martinez, I think, helped me sit up and gave me a bottle of water while the others started taking photos and asking questions. I couldn't stop shaking. I felt like I was outside of my own body, like I was just watching someone else go through this. I told them everything I could, what the guys looked like, how they moved, what they said about Dylan. They asked if he'd been in trouble before, and I told them about the phone calls and how secretive he'd been lately. That was when things started clicking for them. The officers ran a quick background check on Dylan, and it turned out he had a minor record, mostly petty stuff from a few years back. But more importantly, one of them recognized the name of a guy Dylan had been texting recently, someone tied to a small drug operation a few towns over. I guess Dylan had gotten himself into a bad situation, and these guys were collectors. The scariest part, they hadn't even come for me. I was just the poor idiot who opened the door. If Dylan had been home, who knows how far they would have gone. I called Dylan that night, after everything, and he didn't even pick up. When he finally texted me back 2 days later, it was just one line. "Sorry, man, I'll figure it out." That was it. No explanation, no apology. I told him I wanted him out of the house by the end of the week, and he actually agreed without a fight. I never saw him again after that. He left while I was at work, and I found his key on the kitchen counter next to an empty box of cereal and a half-used roll of duct tape. The place felt like it had a shadow hanging over it for weeks. I ended up sleeping at a friend's place for a few days after it happened. Every little sound at night made my heart race. Pipes creaking, wind against the window, footsteps from the apartment upstairs. It all felt like a trigger. I couldn't stop playing it back in my head. The doorbell, the second I opened the door, the way they moved like they had done it before. It wasn't some sloppy break-in. They had a plan. And I was just a placeholder in someone else's nightmare. That realization stuck with me. I wasn't targeted. I was just there. Wrong place, wrong time. Eventually, I moved out. I found a one-bedroom apartment closer to campus, no roommates. I don't even care that it's more expensive. Peace of mind is worth every dollar. I installed a camera at the front door and a second lock, even though the landlord wasn't happy about it. I just couldn't go back to feeling that vulnerable again. I still jump when someone knocks, especially if I'm not expecting anyone, and I never open the door without checking the camera first. Not ever. To this day, I don't know what happened to Dylan. A mutual friend told me he moved to Florida, and honestly, I hope he's doing okay, but I also hope I never hear from him again. I don't hold a grudge. I just don't think I could ever trust someone like that again. Someone who brought that kind of danger into our lives and didn't even have the decency to warn us. He left me there tied up and helpless, and the scariest part is, he probably doesn't even feel guilty. Anyway, I wanted to share this here because I've read stories on this forum for years, but I never thought I'd have one of my own to tell. And maybe it'll help someone think twice before opening the door to a stranger. If something feels off, trust that feeling. I ignored mine, and I got lucky. But not everyone does. I was 23 when this happened, just a couple months after my grandma passed away. She lived alone in this single-story house in a really quiet neighborhood in Iowa. One of those places where people wave to each other from their driveways, but keep to themselves otherwise. I had driven down from Minneapolis to help with sorting through her things and dealing with the estate stuff. My parents were handling most of the legal side, but I offered to stay at the house for a few days just to start packing, clean things up, and get it ready for the realtor. It felt weird at first, being in her house without her. Everything still smelled like her perfume, floral and powdery, and her slippers were still tucked beside the recliner like she'd be back any minute. That day had been exhausting. I spent most of it in the kitchen and living room going through cabinets, labeling boxes, and throwing out expired food. Around 8 p.m., I took a shower and made myself some tea before settling on the old couch to scroll through my phone. There was no TV or Wi-Fi anymore, so I just had some music playing softly. I remember feeling this odd mix of comfort and sadness. I kept catching myself listening for her, like I'd hear her humming or the clink of her teacup in the kitchen. The sun had already gone down, and the house creaked the way old houses do when they're adjusting to the night. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just empty, but familiar. Around 9:30 I heard it. 3 knocks, sharp and deliberate, coming from the back door. Not the front, where you'd expect someone to show up, but the door that led to the small backyard and garage, where there were no streetlights. I froze. No one had called or texted me saying they were coming over. Then I heard a man's voice, muffled but close. "Hello? Sorry to bother you. I'm from the electric company. There's been a service issue in the area." I didn't move. I didn't respond. Everything in my body told me this wasn't right. Who shows up at nearly 10 at night for a service issue using the back entrance, in a neighborhood where nothing ever happens? I stood still behind the kitchen counter, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Then another knock, louder this time. "Ma'am? You there?" I backed away slowly, reaching for my phone. But of course, no signal. I stepped into the hallway, debating whether I should yell something, pretend someone else was home, or just stay hidden. My hands were shaking. I didn't even breathe. That's when I heard something that made my stomach drop. The side door to the garage creaked open. It wasn't locked. I'd gone through there earlier to take out some trash and totally forgot to bolt it. The next sound was even worse. Footsteps, inside the house. I darted toward the attic ladder in the hallway closet. It was one of those pull-down types, creaky and old, and I prayed it wouldn't make too much noise. I climbed up as fast as I could, trying to be quiet, but every step seemed to echo in the silence of the house. Once I got up, I pulled the ladder up behind me and lay flat on the wooden beams, barely breathing. My grandma's attic wasn't finished, just insulation, storage boxes, and dust, but it had a perfect view of the hallway through a narrow crack in the ceiling boards. I stared down, heart thudding in my ears, hoping to God they'd think the house was empty and just leave. I could hear them moving around. 2 men, maybe 3. One of them was wearing boots that thudded heavily with every step. They spoke in low tones, but I caught bits and pieces. "Thought this one was empty," one of them muttered. The other said something about doing it fast and no lights. They moved through the kitchen, then the hallway, opening closets and drawers. At one point, one of them even opened the door to the room right below me. I held my breath so long it hurt. I don't think I've ever felt more like prey in my life. I wasn't even thinking about calling 911. I was just trying not to exist in that moment. Time didn't feel real up there. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour, but eventually, I heard them make their way back through the garage. No rush, no panic, just like they had done this before. I waited, frozen, until I heard the side door creak shut again. And even then, I stayed in the attic for what felt like forever. When I finally climbed down, my legs were shaking so badly I nearly fell off the ladder. I didn't even turn on a light. I just grabbed my keys, my bag, and drove off barefoot. I remember the gravel of the driveway stabbing into my feet, but I didn't care. I drove to a nearby gas station, parked under the brightest lights I could find, and just sat there. I ended up calling the police from the gas station, and they met me back at the house. They checked everything. No sign of forced entry at the back door, but the garage side door was unlocked, just like I'd feared. Nothing had been taken. No drawers ransacked, no electronics missing. It was like they walked through the house looking for something specific, and when they didn't find it, they left. One of the officers asked if the house had been listed for sale online yet. When I said no, he nodded and said there had been reports of men targeting homes they thought were empty, mostly elderly people's homes, ones that looked like no one was living there. I guess they didn't expect someone young to be inside. That part hit me hard. The idea that they had probably been watching the house, or houses like it, waiting for just the right moment. And I had been alone, completely unaware, walking around in broad daylight like nothing was wrong. It made me rethink everything about that neighborhood. all the quiet, all the stillness. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suspicious. The officer told me it was good I didn't answer the door, and even better that I hadn't tried to confront them. "They're not looking for a fight," he said. "But when they're surprised, things can get unpredictable." That line stuck with me for weeks. When they're surprised. I didn't stay another night there. I booked a motel room until my parents came into town. We hired a cleanup crew and a moving service to finish the job. I couldn't even bring myself to go back in during the daytime without feeling like eyes were on me. That house had been a place of warmth and safety for years. Sunday dinners, sleepovers, phone calls with my grandma while she made her famous apple pie. But that night rewired something in my brain. Now, every creak sounded like footsteps. Every shadow out the window looked like someone watching. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a trap I narrowly escaped. Later on, the police contacted us again. They had arrested 2 men caught breaking into another elderly woman's house 2 towns over. Same method. Back door, late at night, no signs of forced entry. They had tools, gloves, and a stolen license plate on their van. They were tied to multiple other burglaries, always targeting quiet neighborhoods, homes that looked like they hadn't been lived in for a while. It wasn't personal, just strategy. But knowing that didn't make it easier to sleep at night. The randomness of it all made it worse. I wasn't special. I was just there. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't pulled up that attic ladder, if they'd looked just a little harder, or if I'd made a noise. I've played out every version of that night in my head more times than I can count. It's made me hyper-aware now. I double-lock every door. I never stay in a place alone if I can avoid it. And I don't ignore those gut feelings anymore. You know, the ones that tell you something's off even if nothing seems wrong? That night proved to me those feelings are real. You don't need ghosts or monsters to experience horror. Just 2 men and the wrong house at the wrong time.